My husband's mother grabbed my newborn son from my arms and tried to hand him to her infertile daughter in the middle of a crowded hospital lobby, screaming to 50 strangers that I was nothing but an unfit surrogate, all because I refused to give up my own biological child to fix her family's tragic legacy. I was 2 days postpartum, standing near the discharge desk when she cornered me. The lobby was buzzing with morning activity nurses rushing by, families carrying balloons, the smell of terrible cafeteria coffee in the air. That was the only reason she chose that exact spot. She wanted an audience. She wanted the sheer weight of public pressure to force my hands open. Are you finally going to stop being so terribly selfish and hand him over to his real mother? She said. She smiled when she said it. That was the thing about Eleanor. She always smiled while she dismantled your life. Liam and I had just been cleared to go home. Our son, Julian, was bundled in a blue blanket against my chest, sleeping through the noise. I had carried him for 9 months, endured a grueling 30-hour labor, and loved him with a ferocity that terrified me. But to Eleanor, I wasn't a mother. I was a vessel, a temporary incubator for her golden child, my sister-in-law Chloe, who had suffered from infertility for years. He's going home with us, Eleanor, I said, my voice shaking from exhaustion. Eleanor's face did the thing it always did when she was denied. The warmth drained out, leaving something cold and hollow behind. Chloe, she snapped, not taking her eyes off me. Come take your baby. Chloe stepped forward, her hands outstretched, tears already streaming down her perfect face. Please, Clara, Chloe whimpered, loud enough for the waiting room to hear. You promised him to me. You can't change your mind now. I stepped back, my arms tightening instinctively around my son. I never promised you anything, I yelled, but the crowd was already staring, 50 faces looking at me like I was a monster, stealing a baby from a weeping woman. Then Eleanor's hand shot out. She grabbed my shoulder, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my collarbone, and used her other arm to pry at the blue blanket. Give him to her, she hissed, her voice dropping the sweet act for just a fraction of a second. I twisted away, screaming for security, but for a horrifying 5 seconds, nobody moved. Not the nurses, not the strangers, and worst of all, not my husband. That was the moment I understood exactly what I was up against. Not the physical grab, but the terrifying paralysis of everyone around me. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the years underneath it. My name is Clara. I was 28 when this happened. I met Liam when I was 23 at a corporate retreat in Seattle. He was steady, fiercely loyal, and had this quiet kindness that drew me in instantly. But I learned very early on that Liam's loyalty had a primary beneficiary, and it wasn't me. It was his younger sister, Chloe. Chloe was the center of the Vance family solar system, and Eleanor was the sun that kept her in orbit. When we were dating, I found Liam's devotion to his family charming. If Chloe had a flat tire, Liam dropped everything. If Chloe was feeling down, Liam funded a weekend getaway. He carried her happiness like a heavy debt he owed his mother. Eleanor lived in an immaculate, sprawling estate in Bellevue. She was a widow who had inherited a small fortune, and she used every penny of it to maintain absolute authority over her children. On first meeting, she was intoxicating. She remembered your favorite authors, sent expensive floral arrangements for minor achievements, and had a soft, melodic voice that never raised its volume. People adored her. It took me 3 years to realize that the charm wasn't just a personality trait. It was a carefully constructed weapon. It was how she ensured that whenever she did something monstrous, nobody would ever believe the victim. The first real mask slip happened shortly after our wedding. Chloe had been trying for a baby for years, undergoing endless treatments that repeatedly failed. It was genuinely heartbreaking, and my heart ached for her. But Eleanor's grief for her daughter quickly morphed into a terrifying entitlement. When Liam and I announced we were pregnant with our first child, the room went dead silent. Eleanor didn't congratulate us. She looked at Chloe, who immediately burst into tears and fled the room. Eleanor turned to me, her voice dripping with ice, and said, "How could you be so incredibly cruel as to flaunt your fertility in this house?" I spent the first 4 months of my pregnancy apologizing for being pregnant. But then, the strategy shifted. Eleanor stopped being angry and became overwhelmingly involved. She started calling Liam multiple times a day. She insisted on paying for the best doctors, the best nursery furniture, the best everything. I thought she was finally warming up to the idea of being a grandmother. I was wrong. She wasn't preparing for my child. She was preparing for Chloe's. I'll try to explain how it escalated, step by careful step, because a woman like Eleanor doesn't just steal a baby overnight. She builds the narrative first. The first step was the baby shower. Eleanor insisted on hosting it at her estate. She invited all of Chloe's friends, most of her own high society acquaintances, and barely any of my family. Halfway through the afternoon, Eleanor clinked her champagne glass and stood up. "We are all gathered here to celebrate a modern miracle," she announced, beaming at the crowd. "Clara is giving our family the ultimate gift, the gift of a child. We are so blessed that she has chosen to be the surrogate for Chloe and Liam's growing family." The garden went silent. 30 women turned to look at me, smiling with teary-eyed admiration. My brain short-circuited. Surrogate? I looked at Liam, who was standing by the patio doors. He looked confused, but he didn't say a word. I had to stand there, 7 months pregnant, and force a panicked laugh. "Oh, Eleanor," I stammered. "I think you misspoke. Liam and I are having this baby." Eleanor just smiled a sad, pitying smile at the crowd. "Pregnancy hormones," she whispered loudly. "She gets so confused." When I confronted Liam in the car on the way home, he rubbed his temples. "She just meant it loosely, Clara. Like you're bringing a baby into the broader family. Don't overreact." Loosely. I was learning that everything she did could be excused as a misunderstanding. The second step was the isolation. Eleanor began dropping hints to Liam that I was mentally unstable. I would come home from work to find Liam looking at me with deep concern. "Mom mentioned you seemed really erratic on the phone today," he'd say. "Are you feeling okay? Maybe you need to see a specialist." I hadn't even spoken to Eleanor that day, but she was planting seeds in his mind, watering them with fake maternal worry. She was building a version of me in his head, a fragile, unstable woman who was unfit to raise a child. If I got angry and defended myself, I proved her point. If I cried out of frustration, I proved her point. The third step was the paperwork. I found it by accident. We were over at Eleanor's house for Sunday dinner, and I went into her home office to look for a pen. Sitting squarely on her mahogany desk was a thick manila folder from a high-end family law firm in Seattle. The label on the tab read, "Vance, Adoption, Custody, Transfer." My blood ran cold. I opened it. Inside were drafted legal documents, completely filled out, transferring full parental rights of my unborn son to Chloe Vance. There were even notes in the margins in Eleanor's neat, cursive handwriting. "Mother has history of emotional instability. Can leverage for voluntary surrender." I took out my phone and took pictures of every single page. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped the folder twice. When I showed the photos to Liam that night, I expected him to finally explode. Instead, he stared at the screen, pale and terrified, and tried to find the floor. "She wouldn't do this," he whispered. "Clara, this has to be some kind of estate planning thing. You're taking it out of context. She wouldn't just try to take our baby." That was the moment I realized I was entirely alone. My husband was so deeply conditioned to believe his mother's reality that he could look at a loaded gun and call it a paperweight. I didn't argue anymore. I stopped confiding in him. I called my older brother, David, who is a notoriously ruthless defense attorney in Chicago. I told him everything. David didn't hesitate. "Screenshot everything. Record every phone call. Do not be alone in a room with that woman ever again. She is building a case to have you declared an unfit mother, and she will use her money to bury you." I spent the last month of my pregnancy building a fortress of evidence. I had my OBGYN document my mental stability at every appointment. I saved every passive-aggressive voicemail. I prepared for war. Which brings us back to the hospital. Julian was born on a Tuesday morning. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a scream that shattered the room. For 2 days, we lived in a blissful bubble. I had explicitly requested that Eleanor and Chloe not be allowed on the maternity ward, and security had kept them out. But hospitals are public places once you leave the secure doors. When Liam and I walked out of the elevator into the main lobby to go home, they were waiting. Eleanor stepped directly in front of the automatic doors, blocking our exit. Chloe was standing right behind her, holding a ridiculously expensive diaper bag, crying perfectly timed tears. That's when Eleanor demanded, "I hand the baby over." That's when she grabbed my shoulder and clawed at the blanket. As I twisted away, screaming for security, time seemed to slow down. I looked at Liam. For 3 seconds, he was the same paralyzed boy he had always been, watching his mother rewrite reality. But then Julian started crying, a sharp, terrified wail, and something in Liam finally snapped. The lifelong spell broke. He didn't just step between us. He shoved his mother backward with enough force that she stumbled into a row of waiting room chairs. "Get your hands off my wife," Liam roared. His voice echoed off the high glass ceilings. The entire lobby froze. Eleanor looked at him, genuinely shocked. "Liam," she gasped, placing a hand on her chest. "Liam, she is unstable. She promised Chloe this baby. Look at her. She's hysterical." "You are a liar," Liam said. He wasn't yelling anymore. His voice was terrifyingly calm, a dead, flat tone I'd never heard before. "You drafted fake adoption papers. You tried to convince me my wife was crazy. You tried to steal my son." Chloe let out a theatrical sob. "Liam, how could you say that? We just want to help." Liam didn't even look at his sister. 2 hospital security guards finally broke through the crowd, putting themselves between us and Eleanor. "Sir, do you want to press charges?" one of the guards asked Liam. Liam looked at his mother. Eleanor's face was rapidly cycling through emotions, trying to find the one that would save her. She settled on wounded victim, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes!" Liam said loudly, making sure the 50 people watching could hear him. "She assaulted my wife and attempted to kidnap my child. Call the police." The fallout was monumental. Eleanor was detained in the hospital security office until the real police arrived. We filed for an emergency restraining order the very next morning. Eleanor hired a shark of a lawyer and tried to fight it, attempting to run her old playbook. She claimed I had suffered postpartum psychosis and attacked her. She tried to get family friends to submit character witness statements about my erratic behavior, but she didn't know I had the record. We went to court 3 weeks later. I walked in with a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. I had the photos of the secret adoption papers. I had audio recordings of her threatening to have me committed. I had signed affidavits from my OBGYN and a hospital charge nurse. And most importantly, I had Liam. He took the stand and testified against his own mother. He told the judge exactly how Eleanor used her money and charm to manipulate reality, how she had weaponized Chloe's infertility to try and steal a child. The judge, a stern man with zero patience for wealth entitlement, granted a permanent restraining order. Eleanor and Chloe are legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me, Liam, or Julian. The family shattered. When the public record of the restraining order hit the local grapevine, Eleanor's carefully curated image collapsed. People can ignore rumors, but they can't ignore police reports and court transcripts. A few of Liam's relatives tried to play peacemaker, sending texts about forgiveness and family bonds. Liam blocked every single one of them. We sold our house in Seattle, packed up our lives, and moved 2,000 miles away to a quiet suburb outside of Chicago near my brother. It has been 3 years. Julian is a chaotic, giggling toddler who loves dinosaurs and getting mud on the carpet. Liam is a different man. The heavy, invisible debt he used to carry on his shoulders is gone. He grieved his mother, not the woman she actually was, but the woman he spent his whole life pretending she was. Sometimes, I catch him looking at Julian with this fierce, protective intensity, and I know he's thinking about that hospital lobby. But then Julian throws a toy block at his head, and Liam just laughs. We never heard from Eleanor or Chloe again. not directly. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Chloe eventually used a legitimate surrogate agency to have a child. I hope, for that child's sake, that Eleanor isn't allowed near them. People often ask me if I'm still angry about what happened. The truth is, I'm not. Anger requires energy, and I refuse to spend another ounce of energy on a woman who tried to erase me. Eleanor spent her whole life controlling people by making them doubt their own reality. She thought the silence of a crowded room meant she had won. She didn't realize that the silence wasn't fear. It was just the breath we took before we fought back and built a reality where she doesn't exist at all.